We got one more guest, one more segment here for this Thursday edition of the program. That is with John Ryan at John Ryan Sports and the number one on Twitter, new contributor to BangTheBook.com. John, how's it going today, man?
It's going well. How about you, Adam?
Doing very well, buddy. Appreciate your time as always. First of all, welcome to the show. I know this is your maiden voyage here on Bang the Book Radio, so we're definitely happy to have you, and happy to have you over at BangTheBook.com as well. You do some great work for us over on the college basketball side. We're going to talk a lot of NBA here on John's segment today, but before we do that, we might as well get to know John Ryan, get to know a little bit about his work, how he got started in this business. So, John, the floor is yours. Whatever you want to tell us about your background.
Well, it's dangerous giving me all that power, but anyway, I'll start with several decades ago. Actually, it's going on about 25 now. I was working on Wall Street. My last position was a chief currency strategist, and we had done probably the initial neural networks for price pattern recognition in the marketplace. So what we would do is come up with the pattern that was existing today, and then have our computers go back into history and match it up, and using that as a precedent for what was going to happen next. And worked with institutional clients only, like Harvard Endowment Fund, Fiduciary Trust, Asian Development Bank, companies like that. So it worked out really well. And I was also in charge of our crude oil, heating oil, and unleaded gas operations, which we did apply to that. And we were fortunate enough to have Leon Hess as a client, very down-to-earth man. I can't say enough good things about him. But it was through that relationship and our head trader on the floor, and one of our meetings that I was running, and he said, John, why don't you take this stuff and apply it to sports? And I remember this conversation like it was yesterday because it's impacted my life so much and why I'm here with you today. And my reply to him was, what are you, nuts? This is a coin flip. Sports, you're not going to find anything in sports. Well, he kept nudging me, and I finally started digging into it. And then there was that day where I said, wow, there is stuff out there. And this was in the mid to late 90s, the birth of the internet. And I researched the handicap industry at the time. And as we all know, unfortunately, there was a lot of TV shows on back then that said, we have inside locker room information. You can bet your mortgage on this, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just all hype. And I was really kind of surprised that, people were gravitating towards this and were depending on it and actually believing it. So I thought, well, why don't I just start a site and see what happens with it? And maybe I can show people a fun, disciplined way to be betting and not wreck your life in the process. So now that foundation principle of mine has carried me all the way to the 25th, now in my 26th year. And it's been great.
Well, and it's one of those things too, we talk about this a lot on the show that, you do want to treat this in a lot of ways like a market, looking to buy low, sell high, sort of looking at trend lines for different teams, trying to evaluate, what that means and what that means to their, quote unquote prices out there in the marketplace. And obviously you've got that background with your financial background, but also too, you've got a lot of that predictive analysis, the different modeling skills to sort of figure out, which directions teams are trending if their prices are in line with the directions that they're trending. So it seems like it was a pretty natural transition over to it for you.
Yeah, and I still am involved with the markets, personally. But the one I guess pet peeve I can share with everybody is I'm a pretty laid back guy, but I get really annoyed when the major networks start saying, well, let's see what Vegas is predicting. And they're referencing the line. And what Vegas is doing is not making a prediction on the game. They're putting out a price tag that will have equal buyers and sellers on both sides of it. Just like when the market opens up in the morning at 9:30 in New York, they're trying to find an equilibrium price for Apple Computer and thousands of other stocks where they'll have equal buyers and sellers at least to start the day. And that I can't emphasize that more for especially people that are listening that perhaps are new bettors. since now we have it legal in I guess 20 some states. So that's I think an important thing to start out with right away.
So here's a question I have for you here. Again, you said you got your start. This is your 26th year of doing this. So obviously a lot has changed in the business. You just referenced, we've got 20 states now that have betting, probably going to have another 10 or so here in 2020 that adopt legislation, probably, maybe 10 or so more after that. So, who knows? Maybe we may be up to 40 states or so over the next 2 or 3 years. But outside of that, which has been obviously a very fundamental change to sports betting in the United States, how has the market changed? How has it adapted from when you started to where it is now?
Well, I think it's a lot more efficient now than ever before because of technology. We have more games on the board. You may remember not too long ago, we used to have in college football, there would be the add-ons, which were the minor conferences that occasionally would have a betting line. Now, there's names that crop up that I'm sure people have never even heard of, especially in college basketball. And those lines are very efficient. And like I said, they have a price tag where they anticipate what human betting behavior is going to do. So, take it to the Super Bowl. We're sitting at 1.5 right now. That's not a prediction that Kansas City is going to win the game. And it's not a prediction that they're going to win by 1. Just as a total at 54.5 doesn't mean that the final score is going to be 28-27 Chiefs, but it implies that, and it reflects what they anticipate to be the human behavior on the game. So, back to the college basketball, I think that's where the strides have been the greatest because of the massive number of games on a Wednesday or especially a Saturday. You have 353 Division I programs. It's very tough without the use of a computer to go through even 5 of those games and have some credible knowledge about the matchups. So I think that's where things have really changed.
Now, as a general rule, John, for you as a handicapper, I mean, are you analytically driven? Or are you sort of just kind of looking to buy low and sell high? What is sort of, your process, your strategy, really across the board, but maybe say, more of a focus on the NBA?
In the NBA, it's I'll call it contrarian for the most part. And what I mean by that is I want to be more times than not on the book side of the game. And what that means is that if there's 70% of the bets being placed on, say, Cleveland tonight and 30% on Washington, and I'm just throwing those numbers out, I'm sure those are not what the numbers are right now. But if that was the case and my analytical work was matching up with Washington, that would be a good sign that there might be a play. So I don't want to be following the herd. And I learned this actually with the markets. By analogy, your tops in the marketplace are always made when everybody's bullish. There's not a care in the world. We're going up to 40,000 in the Dow. And those tops occur when everything just seems to be perfect. At the bottoms, it's a direct opposite. It's a carnage. If you tell your buddy you're buying stock, they look at you like, you're smoking crack. And then the same thing occurs in sports. It's remarkable to me that it's the same ideas. So when we do get situations, I hate jumping off the NBA here, but the total in the Super Bowl is overwhelmingly on the over. People are lining up to bet the over. And that's a red flag. And sure, you look at both teams and you think, how in the world did they not score like 70 points? But for whatever reason in this world, and there's a lot of smart people in this world, when we're all thinking the one side, there's a tendency that that doesn't come in the reality of the game result. So if that number, for example, keeps climbing a little bit more and the betting percentages are 75% or higher on the over, if my analytics say under, I will have a play on the under. And it works the same way in the NBA.
Okay, so in terms of your analytics and what you're talking about with the NBA, I mean, which stats do you prioritize the most? I mean, I don't know if you've got, models and spreadsheets, things of that sort, but which stats do you sort of rely on the most for your handicap in the NBA, or really college basketball for that matter?
The main one is assist to turnover ratio. I have found that to be a very predictive tool in combination with other parameters. So there's this fancy word called combinatorial algorithms, and that fancy word means that I have a program that's taking upwards of 80 to 100 different game measures and finding a cocktail of, say, 2, 3, 5, or 6 of them that have provided optimal results both in the short and the long term. So this season, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And especially in the NBA, because we did have that era led by the Miami Heat and Pat Riley, where scores were, some teams weren't even scoring 60 points back then because of that defensive presence that Miami had. We've now evolved into an offense-oriented league with totals that have been much, much higher than in any season that I can remember. Consistently higher. Almost like the All-Star game would have been lined several years ago. So that causes the parameters to adjust in their combinations and use, but the assisted turnover ratio has always been the main one. And it's simple, by itself, if you have a team that has won the assisted turnover ratio, meaning that they had more assists than turnovers than the team that they were playing, there's a high degree of probability that that team's going to go on to win the game and cover the spread.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know a lot of people like to talk about rebounding as a big one because, there are extra possessions involved with that. And I think a high correlation with assist to turnover ratio does make a lot of sense. I mean, you can't score without the basketball if you're turning it over. And if it's assists, it's a made shot. So that's one that I, haven't heard too many people mention, but it does make sense that there's a very high correlation between assist to turnover ratio and, success, cover rate, things of that sort. And I would think in particular too, it's one of those things where, it illustrates both a team's offense and the opposition's defense, because again, if they're able to force turnovers, get those extra possessions, they certainly increase their margin for error.
I agree 100%. I think in comparing the NBA to college basketball, the scoring variance from top to bottom is far greater in college than it is in the NBA. So in college, the second most important parameter is what you just said, the defensive rebounding. Because a team, if you look at a team that's going into a road game playing a team that's ranked higher than them, or they're higher in the conference standings, and they're looking to upset them, the number one focus is going to be not to turn the ball over, obviously, but then to limit the second chance scoring opportunities by the opponent. And I found that to minimize those opportunities of the opponent to really drive home the chances of a win. The challenge comes with the math, being able to correctly predict those situations.
So I guess a follow-up question to that would be then, when you talk about the two different sports betting markets, I mean, are these things accurately priced into the number? Do you feel like that? You mentioned the efficiency of the market earlier on. Based on the statistics that you use, does the all-encompassing picture generally line up to the spread?
No, and that's why I think I have the competitive advantage. Because, like I said, more times than not, I'm going to be the contrarian. So if I put out a play on a team like a Fordham, who doesn't win all that often, but they're still pretty good within their conference teams, the replies I would get would be that they don't have a chance against that opponent. But those are the times where it looks like it's, like, to me, if I look at it and I say, boy, that doesn't look like a really good play, that's almost a sign that it is, if that makes any sense at all. What happens in the marketplace is that teams get on runs. Look at Ohio State, for example, in the Big Ten. They were ranked number 2 in the country in December and got walloped at Happy Valley this past Saturday and dropped out of the top 25. Now, that's a team that I'm looking to become a buyer on because the talent is still there. It's still the same coach, but they're in the Big Ten. And the Big Ten has only had 10 road conference wins among their teams. And I always like this trivia question, Adam. Name the teams in the Big Ten conference, and I haven't had anybody yet name 11, 12, 13, or 14 of them. They stopped at 10. But there's actually 14 teams in that conference, and they're all very good. So they're right now, that Big Ten conference is a war. Every single game is not an easy one even for the favorites.
So here's something I'm kind of curious about. We'll sort of, take all of the stuff that you've talked about here so far and kind of, morph it into a handicap here. Looking at the 3 games on the NBA card for Thursday night, you've got the Wizards and Cavs, which you mentioned already. Lakers in Brooklyn, a spotlight game tonight. Also Dallas on the road at Portland. Portland with Damian Lillard coming off of that massive performance on Martin Luther King Day. But let's look specifically at this Lakers and Brooklyn game tonight. Lakers open 6, line coming down, now down to 5 in some places. Walk us through what this handicap looks like to you, whether you look, on the overnight lines or you look the morning, the day of the game. How does your process sort of come together?
What I look at right now is I'm looking at the live lines for the Lakers game. And approximately 64% of the bets are on the Lakers. But as you just said, the line's dropping. So what does that tell us? That tells us that there's actually a lot more money going on Brooklyn. And, I hear about, the so-called smart money and the wise guy money, and I really don't know how to quantify that. I've done some massive tests over the years to try to break that out so that thinking that, boy, if I have the smart money, then, I'll be golden. But that's not necessarily the case. But this is a useful tool that starts my process. And I don't necessarily do it in an exact order every day. But in this case, we're looking at it now. So this is confirming what my models would then say is a play on Brooklyn. So my models are definitely on Brooklyn in this game, which, as I just said a couple minutes ago, makes probably no sense. I mean, after all, we're playing the powerful Lakers, LeBron, AD. Yeah, how in the world is Brooklyn going to beat them? But these are the situations where I actually would not be surprised if Brooklyn actually won this game outright.
So you mentioned that your model falls in line with Brooklyn. I mean, based on all of the data that you're inputting, does it spit out, like a projected final score or at the least, some sort of betting line for the game?
It will, and it gives it in a range. And this is, I guess, an important thing to mention, too, is that, we've all been accustomed to machine learning and deep learning. Those are 2 subcategories of artificial intelligence. And these 3 concepts and terms have been around since at least the 1950s. I think a lot of times we see that on TV and we think, oh, wow, this is like, all new stuff. And it really isn't. The new stuff is application to a next generation of the old stuff. So in machine learning, you're looking for an outcome that has a range. So Brooklyn will score between 111 and 118 points tonight. If I was using deep learning methods, it would be targeting a specific number, that there's a 85% probability that Brooklyn scores more than 115 points. So obviously in sports, we don't need to be exact, but we need to create a situation where there's a high probability that they're going to score between 111 and 118 points tonight. And in the past, when they've done that, they're 25-3 against the spread. So you're using a historical precedent to support what the projections are showing for the game. So the math doesn't have any real knowledge of against the spread records. It's not trying to optimize that result. It's trying to optimize how accurate it is in predicting the game's outcome.
So my follow-up question to that point then would be, you have a lot of different thought processes out there when it comes to bankroll management. Some people flat bet. Some people use a fraction of the Kelly criterion. Some people use different betting systems that are out there. What do you do? If you've got a game that's, significantly off, are you going to lever up a little bit and bet some more? Or do you just kind of flat bet and, make plays for the same amount, no matter what the model's spitting out for you?
I actually have clients that do both. I would say 15 years ago, money management was kind of a new term. And I had, 3-star, 5-star, 7-star, 10-star releases. And what I learned over time, and again through, back testing this stuff, that really what you need is 2 tiers. And I now offer 7-star and 10-star. So the bulk of the plays are 7-star related plays. And then the 10 stars are, I guess, akin to game of the month or game of the year. And I try to stay away from the hype of that because that gets people really excited that this play is not going to lose. And on a calendar year, my 10 stars do well. They'll hit, close to 70%. But I emphasize over the course of the season. So many times I'll put it out in the email to the clients that, just remember that this play is a 10-star and it has a 30% chance of losing. So act accordingly. Because I never wanted to give out advice and then find out somebody, bet way over their head and it caused something bad to happen in their life, and this is supposed to be fun and entertaining, and it's supposed to be taking your extra cabbage and trying to make more money with it. So I found that the money management, there's 2 major things I emphasize. Never more than 5% of the bankroll on your max bet. If I'm pushed, I'll say, okay, 7%, but not a dime over it. Weird things happen. I had Oklahoma State. Adam, you got to help me with this one. This is the worst beat I ever had. It was just last week in college basketball. Who's Oklahoma State playing? Was it Kansas?
I don't know. I'll have to look it up for you here while you're talking.
Yeah, they were. The point is that they were an underdog. And with 13 minutes to go, they were up 9 points, and they were getting, I think, 6 or 7. So you think, all right, this is good. This one's going to win, and it's going to win outright. So then I don't usually watch the games. I like watching the condensed versions. So then I get the final score, and they lost by 1. And it was the first time I've ever seen a game where the team was covering the spread for 99.5% of the game and failed to cover. So in drawing this into the conversation, that's why it's so important not to step over the number that you put down for yourself. And I think 5% of what you have available to lose is more than enough to have fun. And when it's not fun and you have a situation like Oklahoma State happen, you move on to the next day and you soon forget about it.
One other question I have for you here, and then we'll take a look at the Big East Conference for this weekend, which you also did for us over at BangTheBook.com. But, as you mentioned, we're talking about models. We're talking about a lot of math and a lot of analytics. And something that I think is very challenging about this business is the gray area. You've got some people that are very, very hardline metrics-based handicappers, and you have the vast majority of handicappers that look at things like situational spots, travel considerations, maybe a coaching mismatch, something like that. Things that can't necessarily be quantified in a one-game sample. So do you factor that into the handicap, or do you try to stay, largely math-based?
I use everything available, Adam. I like thinking of it as fundamentals or supporting the technicals, which is what we would use in Wall Street. So if the balance sheet of a team looks healthy and the story about the team is healthy, then there's reason to believe if the technicals support it, like the moving averages and relative strength indices support the team, then you have both working in tandem, which is a powerful combination, whether it's in the market or whether it's in sports betting. They're identical.
All right, so let's go ahead.
So in the Big East, a team like even Villanova, I think, is flying under the radar, if you can believe me saying that. I think they're much better than what they've have shown to date, and they have in recent years been a team that generally peaks in those last 2 to 3 weeks of the season. So that would be like a buy situation on a Villanova team to make a big run here at the end of the conference schedule. But this is, the Big East is the third toughest schedule in my rankings, or the third toughest conference, I should say, in my rankings. The Big Ten, and then the Big 12, and then the Big East. And we all know the ACC has really dropped precipitously this year, and it's hard to believe that North Carolina is in last place in that conference. You just never would think in a million years that would happen. But Villanova at 7-9 against the spread with a 15-3 record. That's attractive to me because Villanova can now go on a run, and they will not become overbought in the marketplace. It's almost like in the public betting scene, and I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but they look at 15-3 not too often. But a public bettor will look at 7-9 and remember the time they lost with them, and they'll discard them. I lost with Villanova. I'm not going to bet them ever again this season. They screwed me. I'm done with them. But the problem with that is that then you miss the opportunity to actually go 3-0 with them. So that's one of the things over the years I've tried to teach people along the way. That no, like the term I use, no team is out there to take your money. And it's ridiculous to think that way and then absolutely discard the team because you're mad at them. And that's, the one thing I'll bring up too is what I like about my methodology is that it takes away emotion so that everything is so objective at the end, even though the fundamental analysis is rather subjective. The final result, the final plays I put out are objective. They win, they lose, I move on to the next day. I don't want to use Belichick's name that we're on to next Sunday, but it is that kind of mentality. So on the opposite extreme of the Big East, St. John's is outperforming expectations, and that's demonstrated by their 13-4 against the spread record. Adding to that is they're 13-6 under. So what does that tell us? That tells us that St. John's is outperforming what the betting public thought they were going to be because they've covered more lines, and their defensive presence in their games has been much better than anticipated. So they're a team that I think a lot of people like to revert back to the mean. St. John's has been great so far this year, but I think the tail end of this schedule could be very difficult for them to keep this pace up.
Well, over at BangTheBook.com, we've got a look from John Ryan on the Big East here for this weekend. Also a look at the Big Ten for this weekend. So I definitely encourage all of our listeners to head on over there to BangTheBook.com, check out John's work, and of course, make sure you follow John on Twitter at John Ryan Sports and the number 1. John, what are people going to find on that Twitter page for you?
Well, I put out trends of games. For example, I'll go into the database and I'll find one, for example, in the Super Bowl. Believe it or not, this is the last 20 years. The team that has the fewer number of wins is 13-3 against the spread. And I just played around with it. I didn't know this until yesterday. So now let's take it one step further now. Is that coincidental? Is that just a stat that I put together a couple parameters and wow, look at that record? Or is there really something behind it? And I'll just briefly describe this one statistical measure I use, which is paramount in my research on the analytical side, and it's called the p-value. And I think we've all probably heard of the z-score, which uses standard deviations and how much a team's points for that game, how many standard deviations were their points scored away from their mean. So if they're averaging 100 points a game and they score 130, that's a considerable number of standard deviations away from their mean. The p-value actually would say, in our example, my null hypothesis is what they call this, and I'm trying not to get too off the rails here with the terminology, but if my hypothesis is that the team in the Super Bowl with fewer wins will make me money, that's called my null hypothesis. So the p-value will calculate this and confirm or deny that they're related. So in this particular case, it actually confirms to a certain degree, not as strong as I like to see the p-value be, because the closer you are to an exact zero in p-value, the more relevant those parameters mean to one another. So they're conditional on each other. So fewer wins, win Super Bowl. Is the combination, and that's actually an example of combinatorial algorithm. So in that particular case, there is meaning between those two parameters. So that would obviously go on the Chiefs. So the p-value is probably the most important stat that I've worked with over the last 5 years.
Well, again, you can find a lot of great stuff over there, a lot of those trend systems, and a lot of good information in general from John Ryan at John Ryan Sports and the #1 on Twitter. And, of course, you can read his work over at BangTheBook.com. John, a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me for the first time on the show here, and look forward to chatting with you again.
I appreciate it very much, Adam. Really do. It's great.